Greetings. So yesterday RamzPaul uploaded a video about how news sites were correlating porn usage to the lack of marriage in America, and that was based on a study that was released in, I think, November. And instead of just doing a reading of the article, because I found it very, very interesting, I decided to read the actual study itself. It's a sort of abridged version of that study, and I'll give my actual opinions in another video. Are Pornography and Marriage Substitutes for Young Men? By Michael Malcolm and George Nafal, November 2014. Substitutes for marital sexual gratification may impact the decision to marry. Proliferation of the internet has made pornography an increasingly low-cost substitute. We investigate the effects of internet usage and pornography consumption, specifically on the marital status of young men. We show that increased internet usage is negatively associated with marriage formation. Pornography consumption specifically has an even stronger effect. Instrumental variables and a number of robustness checks suggest that the effect is causal. The United States has seen considerable demographic changes with respect to family arrangements over the last few decades. Between 1950 and 2010, the rate of marital formation dropped by 39%, with a 17% drop between 2000 and 2010 alone. Today, the proportion of men between 25 and 34 years old who have never married is more than 6 times higher than it was in 1970. For men between 35 and 44 years old, the increase has been fourfold. Marriages that do form are about twice as likely to end in divorce today than it was in 1950. Traditionally, one of the reasons to enter into a marriage was sexual gratification, but as options for sexual gratification outside of marriage have grown, the need for marriage to serve this function is diminishing. The NIH reports that the fraction of 20-year-olds who have engaged in premarital sex grew by about 50% between the late 1950s and 1990s. Besides premarital sex, the other option is consumption of pornography, which has become more widely distributed since the proliferation of the internet. The degree to which these extramarital options for sexual gratification substitute for marriage is open to question. Friedman, 2000, among others, have suggested that one of the reasons that prostitution is so socially abhorrent is that it competes with women who seek a stable marriage. While there is small literature on the relationship between prostitution and marriage, there is almost no empirical work on the substitution of pornography and marriage. This paper attempts to fill the gap. A sizable portion of the internet is pornographic content. Forbes magazine reports that between July 2009 and July 2010, 13% of all internet searches were for erotic content. About 4% of the most heavily visited websites are pornographic websites. Estimates of pornography usage vary as well, but Carroll et al. Claim that 87% of young adult males use pornography. Using microdata, we find that for young men there is a large degree of substitution between internet and pornographic use and marriage. Heavy internet usage generally and usage of pornography specifically are associated with low participation in marriage. We employ instrumental variables and a number of robustness checks, all of which suggest there is a causal effect, and not merely the endogenous relationship that married men are less likely to look at pornography, or some kind of unobserved selection issue that distinguishes men who use pornography from men who do not use pornography. We assert that increasing ease of accessing pornography is an important factor underlying the decline in marriage formation and stability. As policymakers seek to understand rapidly evolving family structures, the technological change is surely an important element of these shifts. The author cites some interesting references, such as Freeman 2000, who says of prostitution, laws making sex outside of marriage illegal improve the bargaining position of women who want to get married or stay married or maintain a strong bargaining position within marriage. Hence, it is rational for women to support such laws. It may also be rational for at least some men to support them. A longer-term result of access to sex without marriage may be a partial breakdown of the institution of marriage. If, as it seems to be the case, children brought up by two parents end up on average as better people, more valuable trading partners, and fellow citizens, then children brought up by one preserving the institution of marriage may be desirable for men as well as women. Cameron and Collins, 2003, assert that for single men, the search cost of finding sexual partners is an important determinant of whether a man chooses a relationship or paid sex. Pitts et al., 2004, reports that 36.4% of men who paid for sex did so because, quote, paying for sex is less trouble, end quote. Along similar lines, Forbeck and Paternak, 2002, find that many men who engage in sex tourism do so by their own admission, because they do not want to invest in a stable relationship. In a more complete model, the effects are less straightforward. Consider a 2-period model for men who is single at the beginning of the first period, then proceeds as follows. At the beginning of the first period, the man has an opportunity to marry. For example, the cost of purchasing a pornographic magazine from a brick-and-mortar shop may involve stigma as well as monetary cost, and the availability of internet-based pornography can reduce both. And then there's an interesting footnote here. Higher income men do have a higher marriage rates overall and are able to marry higher quality spouses, Chiapori et al. 2012, but they may be delayed as more desirable men can afford to wait for better matches to materialize, see Wise et al. 2009, for a detailed discussion of these decisions problems of this variety. Okay, so onto the data and the methods. The data from 2000, 2002 and 2004 iterations of General Society Survey, GSS. The GSSS is a national representative survey of US residents. The detailed statistics on internet usage were collected only for these years. Our sample consists of all men between the ages of 18 and 35, giving us a total of 1,512 observations. Examining both men and women is problematic, since it's generally understood that men and women face different incentives when making marital decisions. Furthermore, we focus on young men. This is only because of the very steep age gradient in internet usage, especially in the early years of internet, but also because of the age range where men normally take a decision about marriage formation. Even in 2010, fewer than a quarter of men in the 35 to 39 age cohort had never married, according to the NCHS. Our two key independent variables of interest are the number of hours spent on the internet each week, and a dummy with unit value if the respondents of self-report having used the internet to view pornography in the previous 30 days. The reason for both of this is that the internet usage might also substitute for marriage in ways not related to pornography, like friendship or occupying time generally. The other control variables are standard for models of marriage formation and dissolution. Age of whether a man is married, the mean being 27.4. There's also income measure, intensity of religious practice, and other personal characteristics that might incline a person more towards flexibility versus commitment in his decision making, which is measured as whether they have moved city or region in a lifetime. There is, however, a potential for endogeneity in the equation of interest. One problem is simple reverse causation. Married people presumably have fewer opportunities to look at pornography. Furthermore, marriage formation could be jointly determined together with internet and pornography usage. Poor in-person social skills simultaneously drive up internet usage and marriage probability down. Ease of divorce is another source of potential endogeneity. If divorce is low cost, then the ability to get divorced easily could in itself impact pornography, which in turn impacts the incentive to marry in the first place. Results and discussion. For internet usage generally, all models show a negative and statistically significant association between hours of web usage and marital status. The magnitude of the estimated marginal effect of an additional hour spent on the internet on the probability that a man is married ranges from minus 2.48% for the IV probate model to 0.19% for the OLS specification, but all are negative and significant at the 10% level. For pornography consumption, specifically, the magnitude of the marginal effect also varies across models, but again all are negative and significant at the 10% level. Using the bivorate probate model, each 1% increase in propensity to look at pornography is associated with a 0.6% decline in the probability of being married. Across other models, the estimated marginal effect ranges from 0.07% to 5.3%. This is not uncommon. Furthermore, porn usage is likely to be underreported. The coefficients on the other control variables largely have the expected signs. Marriage probability increases in age and increases in income. Men who are employed full-time are also more likely to be married. The sign of the coefficient on attendance at religious services differs across the various specifications, but in the cases where it is significant at the 5% level, it has the expected sign. Higher attendance at religious services is associated with increased probability of being married. To think about whether the results have a causal interpretation, an interesting exercise is to compare the impact on marriage probability of using the internet to view pornography versus using the internet for other reasons. As discussed in the previous sections, the GSS asks a series of parallel questions about several uses of internet besides looking at pornography. The marginal impact of uses of the internet of the probability of being married is shown in Table 4. We have used the bivorate probate model for this comparison, and all the relevant coefficients are significant at the 5% level, with one exception. All of these marginal effects are negative, but none of them are as strong as a marginal effect on pornography usage. This is consistent with our previous findings that internet usage in general has a negative impact on marriage formation, but that the use of pornography has an especially strong impact. In other words, our result is not just a selection effect dealing with the characteristics of internet usage versus non-users. Interestingly, using the internet to look at religious websites is positively associated with marriage probability, even controlling for attendance at religious services. This is our most informative contrast. Pornography users are slightly younger, higher income, and less likely to be employed full-time, although the difference in all cases is less than 1/5 of one standard deviation. Pornography users are more likely to hold a college degree, more likely to be moved, and they also attend church less frequently, although the differential gain is small. If the results in this paper are correct, policies along these lines have the potential to reduce pornography usage and increase marriage entry with its attendant welfare improvements. For developing countries, researchers frequently note the speed with which the demographic changes, e.g. declining birth rates, accompany rising living standards. Given the rapid decline in marriage formation and stability in Western countries, a natural question is how quickly this trend will spread in developing countries as the standards of living rise. Nowadays, widely accessible internet access almost always accompanies rising living standards. Thus, the results in this paper suggest that technological proliferation and access to pornography specifically can be a causative factor that underlies the rapid demographic changes that occur concurrent to economic